Welcome to EoZTV. It's been a while, I know, but something came up and I just thought that it would be better done on video and audio rather than in a blog entry. Something I saw today. This is a report from something called the Association of International Development Agencies from January of 2018, in which they describe how terrible the Palestinian economy is. What's amazing about this report, we're just going to look at one page of it. If you look at it, you will see exactly how NGOs will twist statistics just to make the Palestinian situation look as bad as possible and to make Israel look as bad as possible. And this is important because this Association of Internal Development Agencies is really, if you go to their webpage, and they were, again, advertising the same report as the top of their webpage, they are essentially an umbrella group of over 70 NGOs that are in the territories right now. And they're major NGOs. They are, we can go through the list over here. They have, Action Against Hunger, Amnesty International is one of their observers, CARE, Catholic Relief, the Carter Center, Christian Aid, and it goes on and on. A lot of them are church organizations, but many others are other things. There's Islamic Relief of Gaza. There's, Lutheran World Federation. There's a lot of stuff over here, a lot of well-known NGOs. Oxfam is one of them. So when it comes down to it, this report, with all of these NGOs, and there are probably more of them because this doesn't look like 70, but this report is it's the responsibility of these organizations. These organizations are putting their names behind this report that we're seeing over here that came out this last month. So it's important to look at exactly how they put things together. 50 years of occupation, of dispossession, deprivation, and de-development, okay? Let's go to their first page, an economy in shambles. Okay, let's read this. 50 years of Israeli occupation have had dire economic consequences for the Palestinians. The economy is small and poor. OPT produces almost no goods, high unemployment, and extreme fragility. The depressed Palestinian economy stands in sharp contrast to the flourishing Israeli one. Okay, this is true. So here's their big statistic. This big 2,000% is their big statistic. 5 decades ago, both of them were struggling. The gap between the GDPs was only $1,500. In Israel, the GDP per capita was $1,674. In the Palestinian territories, which at the time was not called the Palestinian, it was Jordan, but and Egypt, but in the West Bank and Gaza, it was $175. But by 2015, the gap went to $35,000. Okay, let's look at this. Let's actually look at some numbers. Let's try to think about this in terms of math over here. According to these numbers, in 1967, Israel's GDP per capita was 1674, and in the West Bank and Gaza it was 175, which means Israel's was about 10 times the GDP of the territories. In 2015, the gap, they say, went to 35,000, but the difference, if you actually look at the numbers, is about 12 times. So Israel's economy went from GDP per capita went from 10 times the ones of the Palestinians to 12 times. That's not really a huge amount. In real numbers, yeah, it looks like it's a huge amount of the 35,000, but you have to really look hard in order to be able to come up with this statistic. Now, let's pretend you wanted to look at what the GDP per capita of the Palestinian territories were, of the what they call the occupied territories. Let's say you just wanted to know what they were and how they've done through time. If you'd be reading this, you'd think the economy's in shambles, it's worse than it ever was, it's been depressed, it's a depressed Palestinian economy, it's been depressed by Israel, and again later on the situation's almost entirely due to the occupation, of course. So let's look at the actual numbers of the GDP per capita. Here it is over since 2008, GDP per capita of the West Bank and Gaza, according to Palestinian statistics. There's a couple of ways you can look at this, but these are the ones that are officially from the Palestinian Monetary Authority. It's been going up. It looks like it's getting better essentially every year. You could even go a little bit further. You could see there was a dip around the beginning, during the Intifada, when they decided to, instead of trying to build a country, decided to bomb all the Jews they could find. So yeah, it went down. But since the Intifada and since Israel started defending itself, it's been going up and up and up and up and up. So why is this now so much worse than it was before? Why are they trying to make it sound like it was worse than it was before? And here's another way of looking at it. This one comes from the World Bank, so the numbers are a bit different. But nevertheless, you could see, again, It went down to, in 2001, 2002, it was at a low. And since then, it's been going almost completely steadily higher every time. Now, let's say we compare it with, like, Egypt and Jordan. The West Bank and Gaza is a little bit worse, but not a huge amount worse than their fellow Arabs. So it's not like it's a huge, terrible. I mean, you know, if they're like in such terrible shape, then you would think that Jordan and Egypt should also be getting lots of aid and lots of NGOs from the world going after them. There's a difference. It's a little bit lower. And certainly Gaza's economy is in the basket. It is a basket case. It's terrible. We all agree. I mean, nobody's disagreeing with that. But even putting the two together, West Bank and Gaza, it's not that much worse than Jordan and Egypt. So it's like, what's going on over here? Why are they trying to make everything sound like it's so terrible? And how did they come up with this weird statistic? You know, saying, oh, the difference in real dollars went from a $1,500 gap to a $35,000 gap. Well, yeah, that's how numbers work. When things go over years, the Palestinian one went up by a factor of 10, according, you know, by 2015 is the number they're using. So they're saying it was, you know, it went from 175 to their, you know, whatever number it was, and then we're going to have to use we're going to have to use this number over here, 175 to over here, it's whatever number it is, like almost $3,000 per capita is what the number comes out to be. And so that's a pretty significant increase that's happened, you know, for over the time. So yes, in real terms, in dollar terms, of course there's a bigger gap. But who cares about the gap? Why is the gap so important? If the Palestinian economy has been getting better and better and better, so what if the Israeli economy has been getting better somewhat faster? Because that's all they're really saying, is that the Israeli economy is getting somewhat faster, better. Who cares? If it means that the Palestinian economy is getting better over time. But that's not the message they want to give. So they have to come up with these bizarre number of this 2,000% gap. It's a completely meaningless number because things are getting better in both Israel and in the territories. Things are getting better somewhat faster in Israel. That's all they're saying. But let's go a little bit further. It says, okay, the situation is almost entirely due to the occupation, which distorted key economic structures and created crippling dependency. Okay, here's the dependency as an economic theory that originated in the mid-20th century. It states that when a strong economy interacts with a weaker one, the weaker economy can be harmed. Okay, there's a theory there. It's a dependency theory. Okay, who says that it's a correct theory? We don't know. As a matter of fact, the footnote for this first statistic, this 2,000% gap, I'll show you where it came from. It came from the Palestine-Israel Journal. And the reason I want to show you this is because they bring up a theory too. It says, according to the basic precepts of neoclassical trade theory, a relationship between a larger economy and a smaller economy that was supposed to benefit the less fortunate Palestinian economy more and more developed than the other. So it was supposed to benefit the less fortunate economy. So here's a completely different economic theory. The first theory that they're quoting in order to make Israel look bad over here says, ooh, there's a theory of dependency that's going to make the weaker economy, that's going to harm the weaker economy. The place they're literally quoting from says, oh, here's another theory which says that the Palestinian economy should have gotten much better because of its interaction with the Israeli economy, and of course that didn't happen. So, but that means there's two different theories. Both theories are wrong. It doesn't, you know, their economy wasn't harmed, but it wasn't increased that much better. It's nothing to do with Israel, or very little to do with Israel. It has to do with how the Palestinians decided to spend their money and how they decided to try to build their own economy. They decided to prioritize giving money to terrorists. They decided to prioritize giving money to prisoners and to families of terrorists. They decided that, you know, they're spending money on these crazy things, but they're not building, and they've been having since 1994. They've never built. Supposedly these state institutions are supposed to be building. They're letting the Europeans run in and say that they're going to build the institutions. They're not building the institutions. They're not trying to build an economy. They're barely trying. They're everything, the entire, I mean, it's a messed up economy. I'm not going to go into all of the details over here, but it's all service oriented. It doesn't really do as much as it should. But let's go a little bit further. They're saying, here's just some more terrible things that the AIDA is saying. Under the occupation, Palestinian economic advances have had unraveled, leading to a process of steady de-development. Again, we have not seen anything that shows de-development. We're looking at the numbers of the GDPs. We're looking at everything like that. It keeps going up. but they're saying de-development. This is most clearly seen in the dwindling of productive economic sectors over the past 40 years. Okay, now they're cherry-picking another weird statistic. Agriculture and manufacturing contributed 40% of the GDP in 75. 40 years later, it's only 14%. Okay, let's take this apart for a second. So in 40 years, agriculture and manufacturing has gone down as a percentage of Palestinian GDP. Why is that a bad thing? Why is that automatically a bad thing? You don't want agriculture to be going up and up and up as a percentage of GDP. Agriculture isn't a high profit industry. Agriculture is, usually, and with any country that's, as that goes through urbanization, agriculture is always going to become less and less as a percentage of a GDP of any country that you look at. But let's go a little bit further. And they're saying, again, agriculture and manufacturing. So let's look at the numbers of agriculture and manufacturing. We can see it over here. I can show you GDP from agriculture, okay? I'll do it over the maximum time period from the year 2001. It's been fairly steady. It's gone up and down, but it's sort of like it hasn't gone up, it hasn't gone down. It's not really anything you can tell from it. Let's look at some other things. Let's look at manufacturing. So that's the other one they're talking about. Again, over the maximum amount of time. Manufacturing has gone quite up, as far as a GDP. It's it's been increasing. Let's look at other things. Construction. Again, looking over the maximum amount of time, it's been steadily going up over the years. Try something else. Mining. Not that it's a huge part of their economy, but even so, a steady slope going up. I mean, it's, with ups and downs, but it's been going up. Public administration, which is, again, one of the reasons that the economy isn't doing so well, is because they put so much of their economy is like just keeping their government going and just giving these jobs where people aren't doing anything. But even so, look at this, these jump over here. Public administration, the GDP, everything in the GDP has been going steadily up with the exception of agriculture. Here's transport, if you want to look at that. So that's been relatively steady over there as far as transport's concerned. If you look at over 10 years, though, it's certainly been going up. Services is something that they really are spending a lot of money on. And again, this is one of the problems, in my opinion, with the Palestinian economy is they're spending so much on services, they're not actually spending time on creating things that need to be created. But look at the GDP has been going, it's a much more diversified GDP than it was before, which is a good thing in general. And this AIDA, or AIDA, is doing everything it can to try to make it look like a bad thing. So this is only the first page of this report, of the summary of this report. And you can already see from this first page, this statistic is complete garbage, this 2,000%. It means nothing. These graphs are meaningless because, again, who cares about what the gap is in absolute numbers? You care whether the GDP goes up or down. They're completely cherry-picking, saying, agriculture and manufacturing, what the percentage of the GDP, that's a good thing. They're saying the exact opposite. And then when they talk about economic theory, who cares whether it's an economic theory or not? There's a lot of reasons why something could, why the Palestinian economy is not doing as well as it should. And we can name plenty of them. But a lot of it is because they just never built it right. They, given their circumstances and given what they have, they're not playing to any strengths. They could be doing a lot more in high tech. They could be doing a lot more in other, in things that don't require, a physical presence. There's a lot of things you can do remotely nowadays. I mean, there's plenty and plenty of things that they could be doing, but the entire economy is built around the government of the PA, and that's where a lot of the people work. And a lot of their income is actually coming from Israel. There's a significant percentage work in Israel and work in Israeli towns, and those are the guys that are getting paid more than anything else. Israel's helping their economy. There's not a question. A significant amount of the Palestinian economy comes from Israel, and Israel is trying to do policies to actually make that better, a higher percentage. This is completely deceptive. Everything we're seeing in this page is deceptive, and I just described exactly why. They are completely making up, they're not making up numbers, but they're trying as hard as they can to say, hey, everything's terrible. Things aren't as terrible. If you look at the numbers, they're really there. You can, I'm not making this up. Just look at the GDP, the regular, not the annual growth rate, but I'm saying if you just look at the, if you look at the, again, the GDP per capita like we were looking at, this is what it looks like over the past several years. Here's the gap that we saw over here, but it's been going up. So it is Very, very deceptive thing. And all of these NGOs that are behind this, and we're going to go in and go to them again, all of these NGOs behind this know this. They know that they're just trying to cherry pick the numbers in order to make Israel look bad, because they know that if they took the actual numbers and if they would show you this graph, especially over the past 10 years, of what the GDP per capita is going up, nobody's going to say, oh my God, things are terrible. They need to be funded. All of these NGOs need funding. In order to raise money, they need to make things look as bad as possible. So they are never, ever going to show you a graph showing that the GDP of the Palestinian territories is going up year after year after year, and significantly. I mean, just over here, you can see it's gone up, according to these numbers, according to the Palestinian Monetary Authority, it's more than, or it's almost doubled, just from 2008 to 2016, if you go to the max. From, if you start all the way down here from, from 2002, it's gone significantly up from around 900 to 2000. That's double. And the same sort of thing if you look at this chart of the West Bank and Gaza. You can look at these numbers going from, again, around $1,000 in per capita in 1993 up to 3,000. So it's tripled since 1993. There's nothing terrible about that. This organization, which represents so many NGOs, shows, and this is just this one page is proof positive of the anti-Israel bias of dozens and dozens of NGOs. And the whole reason is, if they don't make everything look much worse than it is, they don't make any money. So you cannot trust, literally, you cannot trust a thing that comes out from these NGOs that are hanging out in the territories. That's all I really wanted to say, because it's a lot easier for me to say it than to write it all down. But that's going to be EOZ News for today. And hopefully we'll start doing this a bit more often.